there. Diane, probably the subject is, can we trust the state? And of course, you've been pointing out that many people in Scotland have been deeply concerned about COVID and the COVID lockdown, and you've got a special guest for us today.
Yes, I do, Brian. And I just want everyone to be aware that in Scotland, the restrictions, the lockup restrictions and everything else was much stricter up here and lasted for much longer than it did down south in England. And with that, I want to introduce my guest today, who is Professor Richard Ennos. He's been interviewed previously by UK Column, and I now work with him as an executive committee member of Common Knowledge Edinburgh, which he chairs. And with that, I would like to welcome Richard to the program. Richard, if you would maybe tell us a little bit about your background and what you're working on currently as the chair of Common Knowledge.
My background is I was a professor of evolutionary biology. I've been retired about 9 years now. But since 2020, March 2020, I've been against all of the restrictions that have been placed on normal people in Scotland as a consequence of the COVID-19, the alleged COVID-19 disease. I've been involved in demonstrations. I've been involved in yellow board demonstrations. I've been involved in setting up Common Knowledge, which is an attempt to bring together people who want to know more about what's going on. And so it's a kind of free speech group, and we get speakers from all over lots of different disciplines to try and understand what's going on and allow people to negotiate what's happening at the moment in the best possible way.
So I think common knowledge is a very appropriate term for it, because it seems to me that with a lot of members of the public who are still buying into the COVID narrative, that common knowledge is something that we have lost over the past 5 years. It's just been absolutely amazing to me that people are still buying into it, and they're still being afraid of the current propaganda that's coming out about the bird flu and the latest virus and all this. So I'm really, really happy to be a part of your group. Why did you decide that it was necessary to create this event that we're hosting? It's on the 22nd of February for everyone who wants to attend in Edinburgh from basically 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at Lauriston Hall, which is pretty close to the center of Edinburgh. £25 includes tea, coffee, lunch, and it's an all-day event. So I know when you first contacted me about this last year, it was still just kind of an idea in your head that you hadn't fully fleshed out yet. And I'm wondering if I could go back to that time you decided that you wanted to do this and we went and met for coffee. What was it that prompted you to think about creating this event?
Well, I'd seen the testimonies that had been coming out from the official Scottish COVID-19 inquiry, and they are absolutely harrowing. And I read through all of the testimonies, and I can tell you that I was in tears at times, hearing about the harms that have been done to people as a consequence of the measures that were taken by the Scottish government in 2019, particularly those people in care homes, particularly the most vulnerable in care homes, and also other people in care. And there are also many examples where people have been ill-treated in hospital as well. And this inquiry has cost £30 million so far, and there's barely a whisper of it in the mainstream media. And people need to know about what happened and need to reevaluate what happened. I think people are trying to memory hole that particular period of time, but it's absolutely essential that we understand what went on, and we need to understand who made the decisions, were those decisions in any way justified, and what kind of harms were consequent upon them, and who should we, in the end, hold to account for those actions. And in order to do that, I think we need to have a conference where we drop all the assumptions, or try and get rid of all the assumptions that have been fed into us by the propaganda. And in the absence of those assumptions, then maybe we can reevaluate exactly what happened, and we can see who was actually responsible and what should be done in the future. The official inquiry assumes that there was a pandemic, and it assumes that it was a very dangerous disease that was present, and that they were justified in doing this, and that's the ground from which all of the inquiry takes place. And then the inquiry is just about, well, how could we have done better next time? Well, I want to go back to the beginning, question those assumptions, and get a true picture of really what happened.
Yeah, and I'm very, very happy to be speaking at this conference. And the part that you asked me to do was around the media campaign, around the propaganda and the fear that was being raised. And some of the work that I've been doing and looking at, I would say for any viewers who are watching us, please go back and look at the coverage from UK Column back in 2020 and 2021. As those of us who watched UK Column during that time know that they were, at the time, Mike and Brian and everyone on the team at that time was doing some of the best work possible to uncover the fear campaign, the SpyBee, the SAGE, the Mindspace documentation. And, as a result of some of the prompting of some of our other members on the executive committee, I've gone back even further into the film Contagion from 2011 that had the social distancing, it had the masks, it had the miracle vaccine that came out of nowhere, it had the stay at home. We can even go back into the 90s with the Outbreak film, where there was a virus that I think escaped from monkeys in Africa or something like that. And so I think that this is something that they have been sort of priming the public for a while, that there would be a pandemic, that there would be a virus. And Richard, if you would please explain to the audience as well that there are two words that you have told us as speakers that we're not allowed to say at the conference. Do you want to say what those are and why?
Yeah, those two words are pandemic and virus. So what people do is that they use pandemic in the term, they use it as a description of the time. They say during the pandemic. And that immediately concedes that there was a pandemic. And what we need to do is to go back and say, no, it was 2020. What happened in 2020? Not what happened during the pandemic. The other word that I want to expunge is virus, because what we know about, all that we know about, is something called COVID-19, which is nothing to do with the virus. It's a disease. The virus story is a possible explanation that has been put forward by those people in the government who wish us to believe that that is what is responsible. But all we know about is that there was a disease, and we should talk about the disease, and we should question whether actually was there any unusual disease. And we don't need to go into anything about viruses. That will just get us into controversies about whether or not viruses exist, and that's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. What is relevant is, was there a disease that was really serious that we needed to worry about? And if we can show that there wasn't, then all talk of viruses is just diverting our attention away from what's really important.
Yeah, and what I would say to that as well is that my mother died in December of 2021 on a personal note. She did not die of a virus. She died because she went into a hospital for a little bit of bruising after a fall, and she died on a ventilator. And she did not have a respiratory illness at the time. I know that much, but we did lose her, sadly. So I'm really personally invested in this work as well. Thanks so much for joining us today on the program, Richard. Unfortunately, we have to move on, but is there anything else that you wanted to add that we haven't covered?
No, thank you very much indeed for providing the publicity. All those people who are in any way near Edinburgh and are able to come along, we'd really like to see you at the conference. We will have question and answer sessions and time for you to contribute to the knowledge that we need. So thank you very much indeed for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Diane. Thank you. Extremely interesting. And isn't it fascinating that very quickly in that little interview clip, we're back into the subject of truth and lies and propaganda.